3, Compliance Laws and Information Security Policy Requirements. Look at the learning objectives and key concepts for Chapter 3. The learning objective is identify the relationship between regulatory compliance requirements and information system security policies. The key concepts include U.S. compliance laws and their importance, aligning security policies and controls with regulations, industry self-regulation through leading practices, and industry standards, and lastly, international laws. U.S. compliance laws. Government drivers for regulations are linked to consumer protection, stable economy, and maintaining reliable tax revenue. Consumer protection makes markets work for both businesses and consumers. Consumers need to be able to obtain accurate, unbiased information about the products and services they purchase. This enables them to make the best choices based on their interest and prevents them from being mistreated or misled by businesses. Stable economy. How does the government use spending and tax policy to maintain economic ability? In the short term, governments may focus on macroeconomic stabilization, for example, expanding spending and cutting taxes to stimulate an ailing economy, or slashing spending or raising taxes to combat rising inflation or to help reduce external vulnerabilities. To maintain reliable tax revenue, you have to have a good enforcement agency like the IRS, and sometimes most of us think they're a little overzealous, but they're a necessary evil. Policymakers can also raise revenues by modifying existing tax policy, enacting new taxes, and boosting economic activity. A brief look here at pressures on security policies. You have the shareholder value, which maximizes return, and then the security policies help ensure these different legs of this chart, for example, technology vulnerabilities and limitations, and to protect consumer and public interest through regulations. So the regulations and the technology vulnerabilities and limitations, they all contribute back to the security policies, and then the security policies back to the shareholder value. What are U.S. compliance laws? Key concepts contained in U.S. compliance laws affecting information security policies. Full disclosure. The concept that individuals should know what information about them is being collected. A company must give written notice on how it plans to use your information. Limited use of personal data. The concept that the company can use the information collected only for the immediate service provided or transaction made, such as a purchase. For example, assume a bank just approved your credit card purchase of ski equipment. In most states, the bank could not then share that information with someone who will try to sell you a ski vacation. Next is opt-in, opt-out. The practice of asking permission on how personal information can be used beyond its original purpose. For example, a real estate company might ask permission of someone who sold their home if their information can be shared with a moving company. Data privacy. A company must tell an individual how personal information will be protected, and limits are placed on how the data will be shared. Informed consent. The concept that someone is of legal age, has the needed facts, and is without undue pressure to make informed judgments. Lastly, public interest. The concept that an organization has an obligation to the general public beyond its self-interest. It's a vague term, but it's not unusual for regulators to look at the impact an organization has on the industry or the economy in general. What are U.S. compliance laws? Page 2. Federal Information Security Management Act, FISMA. The federal government is unique in that it can identify the standards it wants to follow and passes laws requiring the standards to be followed. The Federal Information Security Management Act, or FISMA, of 2002 is a good example of government self-regulation. FISMA requires government agencies to adopt a common set of information security standards. Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, or HIPAA. We all have some connection to that when we go to our doctor. The Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act became law in 1996. The law prohibits or protects a person's privacy. If you handle someone's health records, you must adhere to HIPAA. This includes doctors' offices, hospitals, clinics, and insurance companies. The law recognizes the digital data exchange of health records, such as between insurance companies and doctors' offices, is a necessity. But in 2013, new restrictions were placed on access to health records by subcontractors and vendors. The law wants to make sure that patient privacy is maintained. HITECH is next. HIPAA was enhanced in 2009 when the Health Information Technology for Economics and Clinical Health, HITECH Act, among other enhancements. HITECH imposes data breach notification requirements for unauthorized uses and disclosure of unsecured or unencrypted data. Then you have the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, GLBA. The Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act became law in 1999. The law is not focused on technology. Rather, it was meant to repeal existing laws so that banks, investment companies, and other financial services companies could merge. Prior to GLBA, banks, for example, were restricted on the type of products they could offer. Sarbanes-Oxley Act. The Sarbanes-Oxley Act became law in 2002. The law was enacted in reaction to a series of accusations of corporate fraud. Some companies were accused of cooking the accounting books or making illegal loans to their top executives. Companies such as Enron and WorldCom became symbols of corporate greed and corruption. Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, FERPA. The Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act was put into law in 1974. This law applies to educational institutions such as colleges and universities. Any educational institution must protect the privacy of its students' records and must provide students access to their own records. This gives students a way to correct errors and control disclosure of their records. Lastly, Children's Internet Protection Act, CIPA. The Children's Internet Protection Act was put into law in 2000. The law tells schools and libraries that receive federal funding that they must block pornographic and explicit sexual material on their computers. The law attempts to limit children's exposure to such material. Information Security Management Act, FISMA, requires government agencies to adopt a common set of information security standards, creates mandatory requirements to ensure the integrity, confidentiality, and availability of data. Any organization that processes data for the government may be required to follow the same standards. NIST outlines security standards and processes, inventory, categorized by risk level, security controls, risk assessment, system security plan, certification, and accreditation, and continuous monitoring. Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA, protects a person's privacy. Anyone who handles health records must adhere to HIPAA. Includes doctors' offices, hospitals, clinics, and insurance companies. Covered in titles, healthcare providers, doctors, hospitals, clinics, and others. Health plans, those that pay the cost for the medical care, such as insurance companies. Healthcare clearinghouses, those that process and facilitate billing, and business associates, vendors, and subcontractors of any covered entity. Page 2 for Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. For security policies to be HIPAA compliant, you must include administrative safeguards, formal security policies and procedures that map to HIPAA security standards, physical safeguards, physical security of computer systems and the physical health records, technical safeguards, controls that use technology to protect information assets, risk assessment, a standard requirement of a risk-based management approach to information security. Information Technology for Economics and Clinical Health, HITECH Act. Enhanced HIPAA in 2009 imposes data breach notification requirements for unauthorized uses and disclosure of unsecured or unencrypted protected health information, PHI. Expanded HIPAA compliance requirements to business associates of medical providers. The Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, page 1. This applies to any organization that lends, exchanges, transfers, invests, or safeguards money or securities. It is not focused on technology. It was meant to repeal existing laws so that banks, investment companies, and other financial services companies could merge. Section 501B outlines information security requirements for the privacy of customer information. 2. Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act. For security policies to be GLBA compliant, they must include governance, includes designating someone in an organization as accountable for information security, such as the Computer Information Security Officer or Computer Information Officer. Information security risk assessment, information security strategy, security controls implementation, security monitoring, and security monitoring and updating. Sarbanes-Oxley, or SOX Act, enacted in reaction to a series of accusations of corporate fraud. Some companies accused of cooking the accounting books or making illegal loans to their top executives. There are many examples of that, like Enron, for example. Describes how a company should report earnings, valuations, corporate responsibilities, and executive compensation. Frameworks used by external auditors as well to certify SOX compliance. Committees of Sponsoring Organizations, or COSO. Control Objectives for Information and Related Technology, COBIT. Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, FERPA, page 1. Applies to educational institutions such as colleges and universities. Any educational institution must protect privacy of its students' records and must provide students access to their own records. This gives students a way to correct errors and control disclosure of their records. Law broadly defines education records as an information related to the educational process that can uniquely identify the student. Educational Rights and Privacy Act, FERPA, page 2. For security policies to the FERPA compliant, they must include awareness. School must post its FERPA security policies and provide awareness of them. Permission. School must have recorded permission to share students' educational records. Directory information. School can make directory information such as name, address, telephone number, and date of birth about student publicly available, but must provide the student with a chance to opt out of such public disclosure. Exclusions. School can share information without permission for legitimate education evaluation reasons, as well as for health and safety reasons. Children's Internet Protection Act, CIPA. Schools and libraries that receive federal funding must block pornographic and explicit sexual material on their computers to limit children's exposure. For security policies to be CIPA compliant, they must include awareness. School or library must post CIPA security policies and provide awareness of them. Internet filters. Only targeted material intended by CIPA is blocked. Unblocking. There must be a process to allow the filter to be unblocked or disabled for adults. Education. Education for children on internet safety and on cyberbullying and how to respond. Do the laws protect? Individuals. A number of laws focus on protecting an individual's private information. Shareholders. A number of laws are designed to provide confidence in the markets. When investors believe their company's financials and risk are properly managed, they feel they can make informed judgments. This promotes a healthy economy. The public interest. The term reflects the idea that an organization has an obligation to the general public beyond their self-interest. Although this is a vague term, regulators often look at the impact a company has on the industry group or the economy in general. National security. The idea that is that cyber-terrorism threatens not only the company being targeted, but also the country's critical infrastructure. Aligning security policies and controls with regulations. Inventory. Make sure you have a solid inventory of hardware, software, and information. You need to know to where the information is collected, stored, and processed. Business requirements. Your business is ultimately accountable to regulators. Ensure the business understands the data handling requirements of each regulation. Ensure that there is an acceptable use policy for the handling of different kinds of data. For example, is the customer presented with an opt-in or opt-out checkbox? Even these simple choices may have regulatory implications. Security policies. Security policies need to reflect business requirements. It's equally important to establish a core set of principles. These core principles allow you to educate the entire business and address a significant number of regulations. Security framework. The selection of a security framework allows you to show regulators that you are using best practices. Use widely accepted standards, procedures, and guidelines. Security control mapping. When you build security controls, be sure to map them to the related policy or policies. Policies also map to regulations. Security control mappings are important to demonstrate coverage of regulatory requirements. They show the importance of each security control. Ideally, you also want to make security controls to the security framework. This will provide a comprehensive end-to-end overview of security. Monitoring and testing. Your organization must monitor and test any security control related to regulatory compliance. You should try to monitor and test all security controls. If you cannot, prioritize the controls starting with the most important ones. Lastly is evidence. At some point, you will be required to provide regulators with evidence. Regulators want to see a well-thought-out approach to the compliance. The security policies framework and control mapping are a good start. The mapping demonstrates a thorough understanding and intent to comply. Your monitoring and testing efforts also provide evidence that things are working as planned. Security policies, controls mapping to frameworks. This is just a graphical look at what we just covered previously. Some important industry standards, such as Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, PCI DSS, protects payment card information on a standard for everyone. Clarified Statement on Standards for Attestation Engagements number 18, SSAE 18, created by American Institute of Certified Public Accountants. It audit examines an organization's control environment, replaces SAS 70. Information Technology Infrastructure Library, a series of books that describe IT practices and procedures. International laws. Although the focus of this chapter is on U.S. laws, there are laws and regulations from outside the United States that are worth mentioning. It would be impossible to cover every privacy or information security management regulation in the entire world. However, some regulations apply to such a broad range of nations that at least a basic description is important. First is General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR. The most important non-U.S. regulation is the General Data Protection Regulation. This was passed in 2016 by the European Union and has sweeping regulations regarding data privacy. The full scope of the GDPR would occupy an entire book, and in fact several books have been written on it. A brief overview of critical points is provided in this chapter. European Telecommunication Standards Institute, ETSI, establishing cybersecurity standards for all of Europe. The European Telecommunication Standards Institute established a cybersecurity committee in 2014 to establish cybersecurity standards for all of Europe. This commitment has published a wide range of standards on topics ranging from the consumer Internet of Things, IoT, security, to quantum safe virtual private networks. Then you have Asian Pacific Economic Framework. Consists of 9 principles regarding personal privacy. In Asia, 21 member countries have adopted a voluntary privacy framework called the Asia Pacific Economic Framework, APEC. Consists of 9 principles regarding privacy. It defines personal information as any information that can be used to identify an individual. The 9 principles in the APEC privacy framework are preventing harm, notice, collection limitations, uses of personal information, choice, integrity of personal information, security safeguards, access and correction, and accountability. In summary, U.S. compliance laws and their importance, aligning security policies, controls, regulations, industry self-regulation through leading practices, and industry standards and international laws. This chapter describes how important it is to conform to U.S. compliance laws and examined how technology and the Internet are driving globalization. With broad use of Internet comes new threats. You also learned the importance of compliance to the economy and how it served the public interest.